All right, thank you everyone for coming. We have Dave Dombek from AccuWeather going to be talking about a wide range of things. He has a presentation he's going to be going over. So, wait, Dave.
Thanks a lot, and appreciate the offer to come over here. I usually try to do this once a semester, once in the spring semester, once in the fall. So today's my turn, and it's just something doesn't feel quite right. It's like 1:30. Usually it's 12:30. I was so used to that time. Came over an hour ago. Nobody's here. Bill's eating his lunch, and but anyway, I had to scramble back to work over here. So here I am. So a lot of stuff to talk about today. Usually, what I'd like to do, rather than getting right into the current weather and the upcoming weather, which there's a lot to talk about today, I usually like to cover a few miscellaneous topics, and we've done backdoor cold fronts, forecasting for New York City, Easter and Passover weather. I mean, we've done a lot of stuff in the past. So with that said, we're going to move forward. These are the things I'm going to cover today. Just some very brief thoughts. I mean, this is a forecast, and this is looking to now and the future, but I did want to give you some of my thoughts, some stuff that I gleaned from other forecasters that I work with at AccuWeather on the mid-March snowstorm. Obviously a big event, the biggest event of the winter season for a lot of folks. Some wind stats I'm going to go through, and then obviously the current. And just a little quick note on that snowstorm. I totally missed out on everything. My wife and I were visiting my daughter, who's going to University of Utah out of Salt Lake City. So we had a big ridge out there all week, and it was beautiful weather. 60s in the mountains, 70s in the valleys, and sunshine every day, and I missed everything. So part of me wanted to be here, but it was great having that nice weather out west during that snowstorm. Here's some thoughts, some quick thoughts on things that we gleaned after the fact. We had a very extensive and very comprehensive in-house at AccuWeather, a post-mortem on the storm, and these are some thoughts I wanted to pass along. Obviously, if you followed the sequence from like Friday to Saturday to Sunday to Monday, as you went through that weekend and got closer to the storm itself, there was a trend early in the weekend. Everything went east, and then all the models, both the operational runs and the ensembles, and then they started to shift back to the west. Of all the models, it was actually the UK Met that was the fastest and the earliest to shift that track back toward the East Coast. Kind of interesting. It even beat the Euro on that trend back toward the coast. There was a very noticeable, and this really is what helped the incredible upward motion that happened in the intense precipitation that was occurring during that storm. There was a jet couplet. And we see that from time to time, and that's something to really watch for. That's like a red flag when you see one jet streak up to the north, another one to the south, and everything lines up just right so that you have an area that the right rear quadrant of one jet streak sort of intersects with the left front quadrant of the other jet streak that's farther south. And of course, the result is some very intense upward motion. Now, once the storm was very well developed, if you just looked at a surface map and looked at the pressure falls, just an old-fashioned, just looking at a surface map and looking at the pressure tendencies, it really showed you where the greatest pressure falls were, and it was right up and just off the East Coast. It was just pointing an arrow right up the coast. Now, once the models did shift back closer to the coast, the ensembles actually did a very good job, great job actually, in highlighting the heaviest snowfall zone from northeastern PA up into eastern New York and parts of northern New England. The amounts increased over time. Like if you kept looking at every run of the ensembles, the amounts increased, but that area generally stayed about the same. So it really had a good idea on that. And this is a lesson for us and everybody. You're always learning. When you got a rapidly deepening storm like this one, including that strengthening upper low, the QPF forecast oftentimes is underdone in these most extreme cases. More often than not, QPF is overdone in most run-of-the-mill storms. But in big deepeners like this, the QPF could actually not be high enough, and that's what actually did happen. So we have to be a little more aggressive sometimes in increasing snowfall totals. I think we did have some pretty good amounts to begin with, like 6 to 12s or 8 to 16s in that. But, you know, some places up near Binghamton got 35 to 40 inches of snow. It was just unbelievable. Now, this whole thing with Philly, that key area, I-95 corridor, that was a lot of consternation, that's a very tough forecast. Was it going to be all snow, mostly snow? Was it going to change over? And again, I wasn't here to witness it, but my experience and history has shown me over the years that even if just one model hints at warming aloft and a change from snow to sleet, it almost always happens. Even when it's like a very close call of like 0, it just gets it to 0, maybe up at 700 or 750 or 650 or, you know, 780, close to 800, somewhere in that range. If you see the temperatures trending a little warmer, and it's right at or slightly above 0, it's probably going to happen. Even if it's one model showing it, it's probably going to happen. So, of course, that did cut the snow amounts in Philly, in New York City. It was still a substantial storm, and when it hit, and the impacts were great, but it did cut the actual amounts of snow down somewhat. And of course, you know, going back to the basics, once the track of the surface low, as well as that 700 millibar low, is pretty well determined, then it's just using the old common sense and simple meteorology to determine where that big dump of snow is going to occur. It's always, you know, that 50, 75 miles, 100 miles, whatever, northwest of the track of the 700 millibar low. Now, talking about winds, and what got me kind of got me on track of, you know, what am I going to talk about? Of course, it's the time of year. It's a windy time of the year, and it just seems like in the last like 4 to 6 weeks, there's so many times I've had to pick up branches, and some big branches in my yard. It's like every time we have a wind event, I'm like picking branches up. My wife and I were hiking Mount Nittany the other day, and there were quite a few up on top of the ridge there. There were quite a few like dead trees that were leaned over, obviously from the wind. They're all in the same direction. So again, winds, as we know, I mean, this is a lot of this is review, basic stuff. It's caused by many factors: pressure gradient, downward transfer, momentum through mixing, terrain effects, uneven heating in a water and land regime, sea breeze, lake breeze, and so forth. A very good guide at wind gust potential is to look at model soundings, daytime soundings especially, and if you had to focus on 2 timetables, time periods, 18Z and 21Z, this time of year would be good times to look at. Pretty much just look at that sounding, determine how deep your mixing layer is that day. You're going to get a lot of days this time of year where you're going to be well mixed to 850 and maybe beyond, maybe all the way to 800. Other days, maybe you're only mixing to 900 or 925 or 950. So see where the top of the mixing layer is, and then look at the projected wind speeds at that level, at the top of the mixing layer. And then it's just a matter of, okay, given the right factors, especially if it's well aligned, you just bring that right down to the surface. It's as simple as that. Of course, a well-aligned flow, always best situation for good downward transfer, rather than having all kind of shear and different winds over different levels as you go up. Lake and sea breezes are always strongest when complemented by the proper pressure gradient. So if you have an offshore gradient but it's weak and you have a sea breeze, it's usually a pretty feeble sea breeze, and it's not a very strong breeze, and it doesn't penetrate very far inland. But if you had that same situation and you have an east, like along the East Coast, for example, an easterly or northeast or southeast flow, complementing that sea breeze of circulation, then you're going to have a stronger wind in those cases. I looked at some stats for the state of Pennsylvania. It's interesting that all the main sites, the main CLIMO sites in Pennsylvania, except for Erie, March was the windiest month. You know, no surprise there. In the areas east of the Appalachian Mountains, the ranking was pretty much, you know, March was first, and then it was a very close tie, give or take, between February and April. Some were April, some were February, some were just about the same, but it was very close. You get out to Pittsburgh, west of the mountains, very interesting. All 5 of those months, December, January, February, March, April, were all real similar as far as where they stacked in the windiest. March was the windiest by a very slim margin, but all 5 of those months were very similar. Erie was the oddball. December was actually their windiest month in Erie, followed by January, then November. March was actually the 4th windiest statistically, and I think that probably coincides with the occurrence of lake effect, perhaps, in the instability in the lower levels in the boundary layer. I don't know, but and of course with cutters, with those the cutter storms early in the season that cut up through the Great Lakes, perhaps. But yeah, windiest it was actually December for Erie, and then it got down to like 4th place for March. Here's some stats, thanks to our friend Bill on State College. He looked at about 10 years of data. The prevailing wind here in State College, no surprise, the way the valley is oriented, is either like southwest or west-southwest. Of course, it's channeled by the topography of the valley and the prevailing westerlies. When the winds aren't calm, these are some, the quarter, not the top of the compass, but the quarter sections of the compass. Southwest, about 47%, 47.5% of the time, almost 50% of the time. Northwest 17, northeast 15, southeast 20.5. The highest peak wind gust ever recorded here, July 23rd, 1991, during a thunderstorm, 95-mile-per-hour gust here. They were greater than or equal to 80 miles per hour for 10 to 15 seconds during that event, and close to 65 miles per hour, between 60 and 70 miles per hour for about a minute. Extensive tree damage, and I have the OBS card on the next slide I'll show you. The least windy months, again, pretty much a no-brainer, August, September, barring any tropical systems. That's kind of the wild card that time of year, to get a tropical system coming through. You start to get cooling taking place in the lower levels of the atmosphere. At the same time, it remains pretty warm aloft. The heights are still fairly high, so that, late summer and getting into early fall, that's a very stable time of the year. And so that's when your winds are at their lowest. And there's a card. There's our OBS card. Trying to think of the student who wrote it. But that was a good, Bill was able to scrounge that card up for me and send it to me by email, and so there it is. All right, the current and upcoming weather. What I did, I'm going to have to remember in the future when I have my map discussion day here to just get an office day, and so I have more time to really, get some more updated stuff, because I was doing my schedule today. I'm actually doing a forecasting shift, so kind of back and forth, and I had to put this together very quickly this morning with slightly, very slightly outdated stuff. It's not really outdated, it's not the most recent 12Z information. Anyway, some quick thoughts. We got a very active pattern. You got one system is leaving today. You got a short break in the action, and then another storm on the way for Thursday. Stays pretty unsettled through Friday, and then it dries out over the weekend. Pretty mild out there. Just when I parked my vehicle over in the parking lot and walked over, it's pretty warm out there. It's actually nice and comfortable. It'll stay that way again tomorrow. It'll be much cooler Thursday, and then you could really call it downright cold when compared to what seasonable temps would be this time of year. Downright cold on Friday. Saturday still, I'd say not cold, but certainly chilly or cool, and then a huge warm-up gets underway on Sunday, and then lasts into the early part of next week. Then I'm just going to go through a sequence of maps. Won't take a whole lot of time, but this kind of tells the story. Here's your winds aloft, your 250 millibar heights and ice attacks. I mean, you can see the one system, then the other, where the jet streaks are. This certainly tells the story there as well, with the system, again, moving through the Great Lakes into the northeastern part of the country now. This was this morning at 12Z, heights and vorticity. There's that ridging, shortwave ridging behind that, and then you have another pretty potent storm now in the southwestern states. There's your 700 millibar, your moisture, your heights, your ice attacks there. Definitely see each of the systems. And you can see another one kind of approaching the way up there in the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada. These are your 850s. You can see some mild air over us now. And then you have a pretty nice pool of chilly air that's coming into the western northern plains and into the northern Rockies, and that'll be a factor in our weather as we head to the end of the week. This was actually, and this has changed some, I just took a look at this. This is what internally what we call our PAN map, our pressure analysis map. Nice little sectional. It plots the surface pressures, and then it analyzed it every, I believe it's every 10th of a millibar. So that gradient, it's a stronger gradient than what it really looks like. I mean, it makes the gradient look extremely tight, but that's every 10th of a millibar. But very easily, you could see where the pressure features are. That low at that time, at 12Z, has now shifted probably a little closer up into southwest Ontario, heading toward Toronto as we speak. And then you could see where the warm front is, or the occlusion. And it looks like now there's a triple point low beginning to show up on the Jersey shore, north of Atlantic City, but probably south of Sandy Hook. And I think that's where that triple point low is going to end up going. And that was really a tough temperature forecast for New York City. Where that triple point low would go, that would determine, are they going to be in the 50s or are they going to head towards 70? Philly is a no-brainer. They're going to get to like 75 or 6 this afternoon, whereas up in the Hudson Valley and Connecticut, they may be hard-pressed to get to the low or low to mid-50s at best. So that was this morning pressure analysis. That was actually the surface plot here, and you could just take a quick glance, and again, you could see the wind barbs, and you could see the flow around the low itself, the circulation, and you could also see where that front is. Of course, quick shot, the enhanced IR, got our loops going, but one system, break, another system, break, and then you have the other one off the west coast. Again, quick glance earlier this morning. We had a pretty good shower that came through here earlier. I do expect it to be pretty convective and unstable, from here on eastward. This afternoon, probably into the early evening hours, there'll be some showers around, probably some rumbles of thunder. Nothing severe. Got some pretty good thunderstorms heading across northern Florida at that time. We've got our break, and then we have our next system out farther west. And we also are dealing with some snow out in the Rockies. These are our convective outlooks from SPC. So our day 1. Our day 2, it's going to be a very active day as this system, obviously, as it rolls eastward. It's a deep trough. It's going to actually morph into a closed low, and then it's just going to roll slowly eastward over the next few days. And I was looking at some of the parameters down south with this. We're in the moderate area, and there's some pretty good Cape values down there. I saw some 3,000, maybe 3,000, 32, 3,300 joules per kilogram Cape values down in there. So it's going to be active pretty much all the way from the Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley for sure, and then down into parts of the southeast. A very active day coming up. And then here is actually day 3. Here's actually the Thursday look, and potentially we could be dealing with some some strong storms, maybe some severe storms all the way up close to Philly. South Jersey, definitely as you get farther south. I think the chances of getting anything strong to severe really ramp up as you go farther south into the Delmarva area, central and southern Delmarva, eastern Virginia, and eastern North Carolina. That is on Thursday. I think anybody is fair game, even well into the cooler air farther north, anybody could get a rumble of thunder. And there's going to be, this is a potent system. It's going to be another good soaking rain. We probably get, an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter, inch and a half. I think a good inch is a good bet here. And some places east of here can pick up 1 to 2. And now this current storm actually is we're dealing with, even though it's nice and mild out here, you don't have to go too far northeast today and into tonight with this one low coming out, the primary low, and then the triple point low taking over. Northern New England, once again, here we go. Thank you, sir. May I have another? They're getting more snow. And this is a quick little glance at what's going on up in New Hampshire, Maine, and on up into eastern Canada. Wanted to show this. This is very interesting to see the contrast in the height field here in this part of the country. Friday, snapshot Friday morning versus what it's going to look like on Monday morning. So that's just a matter of 3 days, and look at how the 500 millibar pattern is going to change here. This is Friday. There's your closed low, low heights. I mean, you didn't know any better, you'd think it was, you know, December or something, looking at a map like that. Now look at 3 days later, 12Z Monday. Look at the huge change in the height field there. That trough is long gone and out of here. The heights just rise like crazy. Most of that height rise happening from like late Saturday and Saturday night through Sunday and into Monday. So big change coming up. And here's some gridded numbers, and you could see the change here again. This kind of breaks it down every 6 hours, and so you can see where our heights are here on Thursday and into Friday, really sort of bottoming out here on Friday. Saturday they start to come up, and then look at that height rise, and of course then you could also see the change in the 850 millibar temps as well, really bottoming out here on Friday, even into Friday night, and up steadily. And look at the 2 meter temp by the time you get to Monday at 18Z, like 2 meter temp. I can almost guarantee you temps will go into the 70s here, probably as early as Monday. And this is the time of year when things dry out. The top inch or so of the soil dries out. There's no leaves on the trees yet. You got to watch for those days where it overachieves, where the moss numbers, the guidance says that it's going to be, you know, at X, but it's like X plus 3 or 4 degrees. This time of year, you could actually overachieve. So that's something to watch for. Whether it's Monday or Tuesday here, I could see us getting quite warm and warmer than what the models are suggesting. Wanted to dovetail back in to this Thursday event, and happened to look here, and every model has a little different orientation, but they're very similar of where the low-level jet is going to be strongest on Thursday. And here's a snapshot. This is off of the NAM, I believe, and it's the low-level jet, 12Z on Thursday. So that is a little core there of 65 knots, far north central PA into western New York State. And then, of course, then we have another very strong core of the low-level jet, and that is the area where the parameters were highest for severe weather. So that's why I think it's almost a given in this area, Eastern Virginia, the Delmarva area. I would be shocked if we didn't have some pretty strong thunderstorm cells in that area. And even farther north, that's why I think even up here with the passage of the front, even if we're much cooler, much more stable, there could still be a brief little burst of some gusty winds on Thursday as the front comes through. This is your lifted index. Again, really, I mean, picture tells us 1,000 words there, paints 1,000 words, and you can really see right off the bat there where the most unstable zone is. That happened to be coinciding with the low-level jet being the strongest on Thursday morning. Now, another question I have is, and I don't know if you guys have discussed this, are there going to be any snowflakes here in the valley on Friday? Or will the boundary layer be too warm? That's a tough call. This same setup, same thicknesses, same 850s, everything else, if this were a month ago, I'd say it's absolutely going to happen. I still think, my feeling personally, is that we at least see some snowflakes in the air, whether they're half melted flakes, whether it's graupel. At some point Friday, we're going to see something other than raindrops falling out of the sky here. And it's possible that if you get a good shower that comes through and it came down hard, it might actually just be a snow shower. Probably doesn't amount to anything here in the valley. The ridge tops, though, I think are a different story. I think it does go, kind of leans more towards snow showers at times, depending on what the surface temp is. And I think in the Allegheny Plateau and the Laurel Highlands, those areas, that looks like almost a given. They're going to get some accumulating snow out of a setup like this. This happened to be the GFS. The GFS, the freezing level seemed kind of high. And it's like, well, looking at that, I'd say no. But then I looked at the NAM, and I actually looked at the 12Z around the NAM. It was even a little cooler than this. So look at where you got two. That's, again, at 12Z. That's your freezing level. There's 2,000 feet. And so we're actually below. So that's telling me that the ridge tops around here probably will see snow almost for sure, and maybe a little bit in the valley as well. There's your sounding off of the Euro. I mean, I just happened to pick one model sounding at 18Z Friday. And of course, you got your moisture from, around what, 600 or so on down. It is somewhat dry once you get below 800. And you got the downsloping flow here, which kind of acts against a whole lot happening east of the Allegheny front. What's your surface temperature? That's the whole thing. Is it going to be 38 or 9, or is it going to be like 43? So I think that's the key thing this time of year is your boundary layer. 540 is not the critical thickness in early April. It's probably more like, depending on the situation, it could be 537, it could be 534, 35. It's not 540 this late into the game. And this is one model. This is its guesstimate here on snowfall. And I actually think that's very reasonable, where it's really highlighting that area from like Somerset County, the Laurel Highlands, down into parts of West Virginia, the upslope areas. I think that looks very reasonable. And of course, you got another zone up in Northwest PA, depending on the track of the low, where not just like instability and lake effect type snow, but there'll be actual synoptic scale snow around the backside of the low. And there's going to be somebody up there, Michigan, Southwest Ontario, that probably gets a substantial snowfall out of this late season storm. Wrapping up, as far as the forecast is concerned, obviously a mild afternoon. We've got some scattered showers. Thunder, more than likely east of here. Have to watch the radars and see what they look like as we go through. Still could be something around this evening. Clouds are going to linger tonight. I looked at some soundings, and it was one of those deals where I think at 0Z there were some breaks. You could almost argue that it's kind of partly to mostly cloudy here. And then you get some backwash clouds that move in the low levels. It's around 900, 925 millibars. That kind of washes back in overnight tonight, so it might just go mostly cloudy for a time. And then the high pressure ridge comes in tomorrow. It's a skinny little ridge, but we got some nice subsidence. And I think it turns out at least partly sunny, if not mostly sunny. Another mild day, and 63, 62, 64 in that range tomorrow looks pretty good. It'll cloud up tomorrow night. We got the next system coming in with another batch of rain. That'll last into Thursday. Could be a thunderstorm at some point. Again, even if we don't have the greatest instability here, there could be some elevated thunder. That's a potent system. So I would expect a good soaking rain here, an inch or more, and maybe some gusty winds with the fropaw. And again, this is based off the earlier guidance that could change by a degree or two, but our projected high here Thursday was 51. And then Friday, a cloudy, blustery, colder day. We've got some showers of rain, and again, wet snow, at least in the higher elevations. And we're going to go with a high of 42. Saturday, sunshine returns. Looks like the heights start to come up. You got a downsloping flow. Heights are still relatively low, and it's still pretty cold aloft. So I wouldn't expect it to just go sunny. It's not like the trough is, heights are going to come up like 150 meters that day. I think there's still enough cold air aloft that it might go to partly sunny or mix or sort of back and forth, but there'll be some sun. It'll be a brighter day here on Saturday, and we're probably going to manage to get up close to 50 by the end of the day. I think it's one of those days where, are we ever going to get out of the 40s here? Like at the last minute at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, we'll get to 50. We're going to bounce it past 60. And that 62 might even be a little bit on the low side. That might be underdone because, again, once it decides to start warming up, it's going to go gangbusters here. And we do head into the 70s here early next week. So everybody will be in their short sleeve shirts, and probably, it's going to be a totally different, you contrast what it's going to look and feel like Friday to Monday or Tuesday. It's going to be a huge difference. So that's my presentation. We can look at some stuff on the animator or whatever. How we doing for time?
Pretty much out of time, actually.
Okay, any quick questions? A lot to cover. There's a lot of weather here. And I tried to focus mostly on locally here in this part of the country.
Any questions for Dave? All right, thank you, Dave.
Okay. Thank you.
Next week we'll have Paul Michael and Addis Juplo from the Campus Weather Service.